Welcome back to the Explainer. So today we're looking at something that basically dictates every single moment of our lives, right? But we rarely actually pause to think about the specific words we use to describe it. I'm talking about time. We're going to unpack 13 super nuanced, time-related English phrasal verbs. We'll see how native speakers actually talk about the clock ticking. And honestly, mastering these is going to help you sound so much more natural, whether you're, in the boardroom or just hanging out in your living room. I mean, think about it. Have you ever felt completely pushed for time, only to end up whiling away your entire weekend? It's a totally universal human experience, isn't it? We run a million miles an hour, Monday through Friday, only to completely lose track of time by Sunday. Okay, let's dive into this, because that extreme contrast, between the frantic pace of our work obligations and the total relaxation of our downtime, it requires entirely different vocabulary to really describe it effectively. To guide us through all these concepts, we're going to follow the story of Kate. Now, Kate is a nurse, and as you can probably imagine, her days are heavily regulated by the clock. We're going to shadow her through a typical, let's just say, rather stressful day. And using her routine as an anchor is absolutely perfect for locking these 13 phrasal verbs into your memory for good. Section 1. Time at work, the daily grind. Let's move to the timeline and see how this all builds. So first up, at 8 a.m., Kate has to clock on. And this simply means she's officially recording the exact time she arrives at work. You might also hear folks say clock in. It's the exact same thing. Now, after working a bunch of extra long shifts, she eventually earns the right to take time off, meaning she gets approved time completely away from work. And finally, when that grueling shift is over at 8 p.m., she gets to clock off or clock out, officially recording her departure. These verbs are basically the rigid bookends of her professional day. But hey, as we all know, professional plans rarely stay perfect, right? Consider the verb bring it forward. This means to change the date or time of something so that it happens earlier than you originally expected. In our source material, Kate was planning to take a much-needed holiday in July. Unfortunately, she had to bring it forward. Why? Well, because the hospital expects July to be an incredibly chaotic, busy month. She had to literally shift her entire vacation to an earlier date on the calendar just to accommodate her workplace. And this brilliantly illustrates the real emotional toll of her profession. Look at this quote. Her hospital is understaffed and she hates to always be pushed for time. This isn't just about the mechanics of a clock anymore. It's about that heavy burden of having way too many responsibilities and just not enough hours in the day to handle them properly. Which brings us perfectly to our next definition. To be pushed for time literally means you just do not have enough of it. You can also be pushed for money, meaning your funds are super limited. For Kate, this feeling of scarcity is a daily reality. She absolutely loves her job, but being constantly pushed for time directly impacts the quality of care she so desperately wants to provide for her patients. Because of that scarcity, Kate really has to try to fit in her most important tasks. To fit in means to manage to find the time to do something or see someone, usually when your schedule is just completely packed. The source text actually tells us that Kate feels talking to her patients is a really vital part of healing. Yet, because the hospital is so incredibly understaffed, she finds it almost impossible to fit in the time to actually sit down and have those important conversations. She's just trying to squeeze it into these tiny little gaps in her shift. So what happens? Well, she manages to chat for a brief moment, but then she must press on. To press on means to continue doing something in a resolute, really determined way, despite difficulties or interruptions. She can't linger. She can't just stay at the bedside. She has to press on with her medical duties, moving tirelessly to the next patient, the next chart, the next emergency. Now, what's really interesting about this next one is the distinction between casual phrasal verbs and their formal equivalents. The phrasal verb run out means that the period of time for a document or an agreement has officially come to an end. Our source points out that Kate's hospital employs a lot of nurses from overseas. After 3 years, their work permits run out and they have to reapply. But notice the formal equivalent provided here, expire. You would use run out in a casual conversation in the break room, for sure, but you would read the word expire on the actual legal document. Okay, let's take a breath and leave the hospital behind. So what happens when Kate finally clocks off? When she takes off the scrubs, leaves all those beeping monitors, and just steps out into the fresh air? Section 2. Time at leisure, winding down. When we clock off, it's like our language physically relaxes right along with us. Let's look at the phrase while away. This is such a beautiful way to describe spending time in a completely relaxed, unhurried way. You have zero strict agenda, nothing special you have to achieve. When Kate does have spare time, she loves whiling away her days off with her old school friends. They might just go around the local shops or simply sit at home chatting, just letting the hours slip by without a single care in the world. And sometimes that relaxation gets a little more playful. They like to muck about. This is a very informal phrase that means to waste time doing silly, unproductive, but honestly, highly enjoyable things. The source material tells us Kate and her friends sometimes escape to her aunt's cottage out in the countryside for the weekend, purely to muck about, away from all the stress of the city.
Section 3. Unexpected company.
Now, of course, even the most relaxing weekends can hit a bit of a bump in the road. Enter the phrase latched onto. To latch onto someone means to spend time with them, specifically when your presence is entirely uninvited or unwanted. During their last trip to the cottage, a colleague of Kate's latched onto the group and tagged along. You can probably imagine the initial friction there. The old school friends just wanted to muck about together, and suddenly there's a coworker there who just sort of attached herself to their plans.
So the crucial point is how this unexpected guest completely changes the dynamic. And that brings us to a fantastic comparison of two very similar sounding verbs. Hang out, hang around, or hang round means casually spending a lot of time somewhere. Kate's friends love to just hang out together. But because this new colleague joins them, they suddenly found themselves hanging on. Hang on means waiting, usually for a short but pretty irritating amount of time. The text actually notes that the new colleague always kept the group hanging on while she got ready in the mornings. Thankfully, it all worked out in the end, and the group grew to like her. But you can clearly see the difference, right? Between the relaxing act of hanging out and the frustrating act of hanging on. And that brings us to the end of Kate's day and the end of our lesson on these 13 vital phrasal verbs. We've gone from the high-stress need to clock on and press on at work to the absolute glorious freedom of whiling away the hours and mucking about with friends. Now it's your turn to take this vocabulary off the screen and into your real life. So I'll leave you with this question. How are you planning to while away your weekend? Get out there, practice these phrases, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.